Good morning, everyone. My name is Noelle Kowalski. I am the Director of Marketing at Fidelity Bank. I'm really excited about today's panel because I think it's probably a topic we all think about more often than we would maybe like to. But I'm going to let each of the panelists very briefly introduce themselves, and then we will get started because I know there's lots of good stuff going on that everybody wants to take advantage of. So Alex, you want to start?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Grover. I'm the president of I2M. I2M is a manufacturing company. We're based out of Mountaintop, Pennsylvania, and we're a manufacturer of flexible plastic films. My objective with the business is to integrate people empowerment and sustainable plastics manufacturing, and excited to be here today.
Good morning. My name is Holly Polkavage, and I'm the president and CEO of Full Creative. We're a creative agency located in downtown Wilkes-Barre on the public square. We provide services like video production, graphic design, social media management, web design development strategy, and more. We have a lot of fun. We call ourselves storytellers, and I think it's relevant to share that I have a team of 12, so we are a small business.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Damari Bonilla Rodriguez. I live in Bushkill, Pennsylvania. I am the CEO and founder of my own consulting firm, Dr. Damari Bonilla Rodriguez and Associates, LLC. I am a school board director in the East Stroudsburg Area School District and serve on several local and national boards, but my most important job is being the mother of 13-year-old boys, young men.
Great, thank you guys very much. So we'll get started. Again, as Amy said, if anyone has any questions, if you could hold them until maybe the last 10 or 15 minutes, we would be more than happy to address them at that point. We all know a lot has changed since 2020 and COVID. There's a brand new environment. We live in it, we work in it, we play in it. What are some of the major differences that you see now between what employees used to expect from their employers and kind of how those perspectives have shifted? Mary, you want to start?
Sure. Definitely an unprecedented global pandemic will shift the dynamics, right? We have seen individuals leaving the workforce at higher rates than in the past. We have seen individuals prioritizing family and personal priorities over their career or being in the workplace at a different pace than we have in the past, because all of a sudden, when health is on the line, when stress management is front and center, and when you're trying to juggle all of these different aspects of your lives, you realize that you should put yourself as a priority. So we've seen a shift in terms of movement. We've also seen that individuals are moving from one job to another or one company to another for less money than in the past. So maybe you would expect for a $10,000 raise in order to move, but now we're seeing people leaving for a little bit less just because it's more money and why not, and taking more risks, which puts employers in a position to be creative about how do we retain the talent that we have and how do we recruit new talent and then retain that talent.
Alex, your firm is pretty large, so have you seen a shift like that?
Yeah, so manufacturing's been really interesting. We've been talking in the industry for, the past 10 years or so about the gap, what we call the talent gap, right? So the gap between people with the technical skills to work in manufacturing and then the manufacturing needs. And what's been really interesting is a lot of the conversation that I've been hearing is, people don't want to work, right? Or people would rather stay home, or they don't want to enter the manufacturing industry. So I think the biggest shift in my side of the business has been, how do we instead change that narrative and really think about what can we do as employers to be aggressive, to be thoughtful, and to remove some of those barriers to employment, such as transportation and childcare, so that it makes it easier for people to work. That's something that I've been hearing a lot, and I think it's just critical that we make some of those changes internally versus continue to spin that narrative, because it's complaining about it really isn't going to do a whole lot of anything. Manufacturing is growing in the United States, which is incredibly exciting, but we within the industry have to be really proactive about making sure we've got a great workforce and we're helping them get to work and stay at work.
Great, thank you. We've seen a shift into more hybrid schedules, flexible working conditions. I know typically in my industry, banking has been very conservative. You're in the office at 9 and you're out of the office at 5 or 6. That has even changed considerably for most bankers. Obviously, if you're in a branch and you're dealing with clients day to day, maybe it's a little bit different. But we have certainly started to offer incentives like that we didn't typically offer before, and that has drastically helped us to be able to not only recruit, but maybe even more importantly, retain good bankers who have issues with childcare or transportation, things like that, and make sure that we're really accommodating them as much as we can to get the most out of them, and for us to give them the most that we can. So great. Holly, how is your company pivoting? You guys are smaller, so maybe you're a little bit more agile, but perhaps resources are a challenge for you that maybe aren't a challenge for larger organizations. So what have you done?
Yeah, for sure. So with the pandemic, we just had to first and foremost be flexible, which I think is, besides pivot, probably one of the most popular words the past few years. Like I mentioned, there's 12 of us, and before the pandemic, the team was about, I think, 6 of us, so we actually grew. At first, it was really scary, we didn't know what was gonna happen, and then we expanded because, digital marketing, we need to get online, we need to not be analog anymore because of the world that we live in, and we don't know, when we're all gonna be able to be under the same roof again. So what we did is we turned inward, and we basically have left it up to the team to this day, where you can choose to either be in-house, hybrid, so 2 to 3 days a week you come to the office, or fully remote. And it's an interesting blend. I would say there's 4 of us that are now in-house full-time, about 3 that take a hybrid approach, and then the other, whatever that math would be, 5-ish, are fully remote, 3 of which actually live about 5 to 8 minutes away from the office. So we had to take a look at what does that look like setting people up at home and in the office. So now you have a setup, whether it's a laptop or a full-blown desktop with all of the odds and ends. We definitely had to take a look at that. And then we had to also increase our communication, intentional communication, right? Because when you're under the same roof and every day you're kind of like popping over, now we work in somewhat of a co-working space, half wall, so we can very easily kind of say, hey, can we work on this together? We can't necessarily do that anymore, so we had to really lean into different tools like Slack for communication, different project management tools as well, and platforms, and intentionally set the time. So we have 2 full team meetings per week. One is retainer, one is kind of our, I'm just gonna say our BS meeting. We're not allowed to talk about work, we just do a lot of fun things at the end of the week. We also have an optional, what we call coffee with Cole, a little bit of play on our name, every morning at 9:45 for 15 minutes. Also not allowed to talk about work, just so we can connect and stay connected. That's on top of department meetings and things like that. So just kind of stepping back, taking a look, but in the process, and again, because we're small, every step of the way, we can have that touch point communication with our team saying, is this working? Do we need to pivot, be more flexible, switch things up, remove a meeting, add a meeting? And that's been the approach we've taken.
This question is for anyone really who wants to take it, or everyone. Do you think the companies have found it more challenging or easier to feel like a cohesive unit and feel like it's easy to collaborate and work together with those schedules?
I know I just spoke, but I'll jump into this one because we actually got a comment of like, you're digital marketing, it's probably easy for you to all go remote if you really wanted to. And it's like, yeah, technically we can make it work. We're proving that we are so far, but it's not necessarily the easiest to brainstorm when you're not all under the same roof, right? So again, we have to be really intentional. Can you repeat the question so I'm making sure I'm answering it?
Do you think companies in general find it more difficult or less difficult to kind of collaborate and work together?
Yeah, so with the collaboration, at first we had like a renewed energy almost, because even though it was scary, it was also a weird excitement of like, what is the world now and how does this look? And I'm looking at our managing director, Cameron, who helps me out with a lot of these things. It's actually more recently, in the last 6 months, where we are almost struggling a little bit with the people that are fully remote, and I'm being very honest right now and transparent. We're keeping that buy-in, or keeping them energized and excited, and having to have a conversation of, we only ask our team members to work 30 hours a week to be considered full-time, and that's a struggle for them right now, right? So, which I think is like, and we're salaried, so like we could be asking to work 50 hours, and we don't. So, I guess my point there is it's still a struggle, and we're still, even though the pandemic is no longer technically, we're still facing the effects and trying to figure that out. That's what makes sense.
Yeah, similarly, so my plant runs 24/7, right? And we were deemed an essential business. So, you know, I like to joke that during the pandemic, everyone sort of was working from home, and my life really didn't change other than I stopped getting coffee in the morning. I just, you know, got coffee. And but it was amazing because even though, you know, we didn't have people working remotely and most of my team stayed on site, the implications were still very real, right? So instead of, usually with a 24-hour shift, you have a changeover, and there's sort of that face-to-face meeting between operators, there's the face-to-face meeting between shifts, really important to communicate things. That was no longer happening. And it was amazing to see, you know, 2, 3, 4 weeks into the pandemic and making this change, how dramatically that impacted our quality and our culture. So I think it's become much more difficult. The great news is I think technology has really caught up in a lot of positive ways. And so businesses that are able to leverage things like Slack, like Teams, like other types of tools and resources, even automation, those are really the functions and tools that I think allow us to kind of bridge some of these gaps. I think a lot of these gaps may be there to stay, right? But the great news is by leveraging the effects of all of these really great technological innovations and purposely creating, you know, those personal touch points, I think most businesses, you know, are able to overcome a lot of those hurdles.
Yeah, I would chime in and say in terms of education and the nonprofit sector, community-based work relates to connecting with individuals, to being front and center, to having some of that in-person connectivity that you were talking about. So it's definitely been challenging and pushes organizations and institutions to be not just creative, as we talked about earlier, and some of the great ideas that were already shared, but also to be very strategic. And I love that you talked about intention, Holly, because you have to be intentional in order to demonstrate to employees what is the benefit for them, right? Because when you have individuals seeing the benefit of waking up a little bit later, being able to, you know, take care of things at home during the workday and sort of, you know, play that both sides on a day-to-day, pushing people to come back into the office when they prove that they could do their jobs from home is definitely a challenge. So we're seeing in the education space, as we're negotiating contracts with different groups, that there is work from home being built into the language in a way that was not built before. And you have to think about what are those different roles, what can we do to ensure that if they're working from home, we're staying connected, but also what are some of the resources that we're able to provide so that people are able to manage their time well, so that they're able to stay connected in the ways that, that we've talked about already.
Great, thank you. So we are at a women's conference, so I think it would probably behoove us to have a question or two dedicated maybe to women and the unique challenges that we have. I know my daughter just turned 4, and so before the pandemic, I didn't really have to worry about her. I could work 50 hours or 60 hours, and it wasn't really a big deal because I didn't have to rush to get home or take care of her. I could sleep in a little bit, and I didn't have to get another human out the door, which is very challenging for anybody who has a toddler. It's like impossible to get out on time. So I think one of the things we talked about when we had our pre-call, we started to say work-life balance, and Demiri, I think it was you, we said there's never really a balance. Like, it's never balanced. It's always a juggle. And sometimes you're giving a little bit more to one area of your life than to another, and then it shifts later on depending on what's going on. So I think, do you see women primarily that you work with, and even, you know, girlfriends or family members, do you see them reprioritizing work or reprioritizing their families or their health and their wellness in a way that maybe they were kind of had tunnel vision prior to the pandemic, and now they've had an ability to kind of make that shift?
I think we're in the process, and I don't want to speak for any of the women that in my life directly, but again, from my perspective of undoing, before the pandemic, if you had a meeting that you had to drive to, you had the buffer of driving to the meeting and going to the meeting, then driving back from the meeting. Now, in the Zoom world, in the past 3 years, you're in a meeting, then a meeting, then a meeting at 9, 10, 11, 12. I'll take that lunch meeting as well and, keep my camera off. So we're unlearning that in this process. And I think in general as women, we're the first people to say, I'll help or I'll step up or I'll fill in that gap if needed, because I believe I'm very fortunate that my team, I think a majority of my team doesn't see it as just a job, but as their career and as a part of their life. Right, Cameron? That's good. I did not pay her to say that because I technically did. But no, I want to share just a quick example, and it's not with Cameron, but another attendee at today's conference, but I won't call her out. She is the epitome of working 40-plus hours, and us having to say, stop doing that, tell us when you're at capacity, stop saying you'll take on that next project to help get it over the finish line. There are other people that can step up and support. There are other men here that can step up and take on a little bit more, admittedly. So we were able to sit down one day and really kind of dig into maybe the why behind that, and something very simple, but that helped her, and she does it naturally now, is we said every 6 weeks, no matter what, you're gonna take a day off. I don't care if you're going somewhere or have a vacation, it could just be a day at home. It might not seem like that big of a deal, but I would check in the beginning, every 6 weeks, did you put your day on? Did you put your day on? And now that was a little over a year ago, and she's just doing it naturally, taking time off. She's getting married at the end of the year. She literally was gonna work up to the day before her wedding, and I said, no, take that Monday off. She's off 3 weeks now to enjoy it all, So I just want to share that example because, sometimes just sitting down with your people, having those conversations, especially with their women, reminding them that it will be there tomorrow. And I always say it's marketing. It's not brain surgery. It's not brain surgery. Like, nothing's going to break. We could always fix it. So
I think that's a good point. I think too, with the hybrid and the remote schedules, there's not that stop and start similarly to what you said about the Zoom.
Yes.
You're home and you are working and there is no delineation between personal and work. And I think that while on the surface that does make it a little bit more convenient, I think it also presents a whole new host of challenges that you really need to be deliberate and mindful of that stop and start. Otherwise it just blends and I think you end up getting completely burnt out all over as opposed to maybe just one segment or another.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll chime in and say that when we think about what employers can do best, this is a great example, right? Whether you are the president, whether you're a manager, or even in the role of a colleague, to encourage one another that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to take breaks. A couple of the strategies that I've implemented is sometimes I move something to a call instead of a Zoom, because I actually worked virtually for many years before the pandemic, and one of the things that I love about a call is that I can understand the tone of someone's voice, how they're feeling by the way they sound, and figure out how their energy is. And sometimes I find that when we're on Zoom and we're on camera, we're worried about how we look, how's my hair, how's this, how's that, how's the lighting, and all of that is important, but it doesn't always allow us to connect in the way that would allow me to pick up that you're not well, or you're really excited about something. That gives us that personal connection. But also during the pandemic, we started talking more about self-care, which was great because it became a public conversation, but it can't be just talking the talk. We have to walk the walk, which is what you just talked about with your team member. And so self-care can be taking a moment just to not have any meetings, or taking some time to go for a ride in the car because that's quiet time for you. And I admit that I'm always on the go, and it's really hard for me to be in a quiet space, but I'm not my best as a colleague, as an employee, as an employer, if I don't have those times to slow down. And I'll say the reason that I don't believe in balance is because we juggle so many different hats. And when we juggle many hats and we try to find this level playing field on the day-to-day, that's when we end up creeping into perfectionism and the imposter syndrome and all of these other dynamics that cause us to feel like I'm not enough and we need validation from somebody else. And even when we're being told that we're doing a good job, we don't necessarily accept it. So the self-care piece is also about your mental well-being, being able to stop, to slow down, and to be that buffer for others when they're doing it as well. So when my kids are sick, I will reschedule meetings, and I used to feel guilty about that, but I don't, because they need me to make tea and give them medicine, and today I'm mom. And then when they're better, I'll say, guys, I'm gonna be working really hard for the next couple of days to catch up for the days I took off. And that's the way that I'm able to navigate, as well as planning and thinking, this is what my month looks like, this is what my week looks like, but taking it day to day so that I have an idea, and if I have to move things around, I can.
I think that's great. I think scheduling is probably really important, but still having the agility to kind of move around if you need to. Alex, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, I suppose I take a slightly different vision, right, in terms of what that looks like within my organization and some of my colleagues. So I think the two most important things that leaders can do for women in their organization, the first is prioritization, right? Helping prioritize, making really clear to each of those individuals what are the key metrics for the business, and how do you eliminate all of the other stupid stuff, right, that really shouldn't be necessary. The second thing is being an advocate for women and for anyone in your organization, men or women who might be burned out, right? Making sure that work is spread evenly between people. It's your job as a leader to make sure that if there's a woman who's in the meeting and every single time she's assigned as the one to be the note taker to send the follow-up email, that you're not letting that happen, that you're assigning someone else who may have less, more availability, less on their plate, more capacity, and making sure that they're the ones who are then responsible for it. So I think it's about being really tapped into your organization, making those priorities really clear, but then also advocating and understanding what the capacity is for your team. And I completely agree. It could be, you can do that whether you're a leader or president of the business, you could do that whether you're a manager, or if you're just seeing it as a colleague, right? And seeing in a meeting, okay, this person is always kind of getting the short end of the stick and they're always getting all the responsibilities. Making sure that you bring that up and you help advocate for members of your team. And I think that's really the way, as women, we can work together to make sure that we don't have as much burnout and that we're not trying to feel obligated to take on all these responsibilities.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. It's just about 20 after, so for my last question before we start taking some questions from the audience, I'd like to just go down the panel, and if everyone could just provide maybe one takeaway, one unique thing that your company has implemented or that you have personally implemented to help cultivate yourself, your employees, people that you work with, making sure that everyone is sort of always striving to kind of that next level. One key takeaway or one key thing that you may have done over the course of the last, I know this is like a zinger, we didn't go over this one.
No, it's hard.
It is.
I would say safe spaces and safe people, just ensuring that you have those outlets, whether it's a relaxation room. So in some of our schools, we put together rooms where there are massage chairs that are heated and it's quiet and you can't go there to work, you go there to relax. And I know it takes us a lot to wind down, and then by the time you wind down, it's time to go back to work. But, and then also safe people, employee resource groups, small groups of individuals to be able to look out for each other. It's important to have people that you can trust and that you can go to thought partner, not just around work, but share strategies like this. How do we create a better workplace? How do we support each other in terms of, as Alex was saying, being able to speak up for others and push back, because sometimes the leaders of the company or the organization may not even realize because they're focusing on the bottom line and the work. And so if we talk with each other, we can come together and say, hey, these are some things that we've noticed that we love, not just to see change, but that we're willing to be partners in the change. And these are ideas that we have. So safe spaces and safe people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll share a fun one. As a growing small business, so we're constantly implementing not changes, but policies and kind of tightening the ship. But one that, again, Cameron, you should just be up here because I keep referencing you and saying hi to you. Cameron brought to me, so we've all heard of the 4-day work week. I think we probably all love the 4-day work week. So we kind of met in the middle. Cameron brought me some research and thoughts behind it. And we implemented something called Summer Fridays last summer, where at 2 o'clock, we're closed. We informed our collaborators, we set up our away messages, and we all signed off at 2 o'clock, maybe even a few minutes before. And you wouldn't think, oh, like 3 hours, that's not a huge deal. It feels like a whole day when you have that extra 3 hours on an afternoon, especially in the summer, beautiful weather, and when I get outside for a sunshine walk. Highly recommend sunshine walks as well with your team. You can implement those. It's literally just a walk in the sunshine. So Summer Fridays went over well. We assessed the team at the end of the summer. They love them. Okay, let's make them Fall Fridays. Okay, now Winter Fridays. And in 2023, we now just close at 2 o'clock. So I think that feeds into the fact that, again, we're not trying to work you to the bone. We want to find, I hate to use it, the work-life balance. I get it. I actually agree with your perspective on it, but for lack of having a better term here, we'll have to work on that too, Cameron. But yeah, just being able to support them and say, like, we genuinely want you to live your life and this to be a part of it. So that is a mentality we have, and I think that reinforces that at Whole Creative.
So at I2M, the biggest, I think, change that we made was focused around childcare, right? So during the pandemic, one of the things that I noticed was we started to have an enormous amount of call-offs, right? So call-off is when someone 36 hours before the start of their shift calls off and says they can't come into work, right? Incredibly disruptive, incredibly expensive for us because we may have to shut down a machine or put someone who's less experienced in the position. It's a big problem. And we're like, what is happening? Like, why is this all of a sudden occurring? And after doing some research, I learned that people were having to make the decision between leaving their 8-year-old at home to do, schooling by themselves, right? This online learning, or come to work, right? And in my mind, that wasn't a decision I wanted any of the members of our team to have to make. Additionally, in manufacturing, you're always looking for waste, right? And where can you be more efficient? And we had all this empty conference room space because we weren't entertaining, we had no customers coming in, we had no suppliers, everything was entirely virtual. And so we made the decision to open up that conference room space to create the I2M Learning Center. I hired a teacher who's now actually principal, I think, at Valley West. And so he was there, people would bring their kids in, they all wore headphones, would engage in their virtual learning. The teacher would help them in the event of questions and things like that. We retained every single individual who was there. I'll never forget the moment where I had one of the moms whose son was in that program, and she came to me with tears in her eyes and basically was like, I have no idea what I would have done if we hadn't implemented this, right? And so that in my mind is the example of why we want to do that sort of thing. And although, after the pandemic ended, we ended that program and now it's morphed into a childcare partnership that we have. What it showed to me was how important it is for employers to understand their team, understand the needs of their team, not assume the worst, right? Not assume that people just were using the pandemic not to come to work, right? There's a real problem there. And it is up to us as employers to identify what are those solutions that we need to put into place in order to make sure that we help our teams and empower them to be, great members of the company and great members of their families as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, ladies. We'll take a couple questions from the audience now. We have a few minutes.
Do we need the mic?
I don't need a mic. I'm pretty loud. So Dr. Vanilla Rodriguez was saying about the importance of slowing down, setting those boundaries. But what if you're seeing the opposite problem and, we're seeing in this world of 2023 that working from home is viewed a bit less as a perk and more as a right. And kind of related, we're seeing the need to turn up the heat a little bit and also make sure that accountability and productivity is equal in this hybrid model at home and in the office. Have you seen that, and how do you address that where right now I think self-care and boundaries are emphasized and valued maybe more than ever, but not at the expense of getting your job done? And so how do you kind of focus on that?
So I see, everything sort of as a pendulum, because I think it's a really good point, and it's exactly what we're seeing, right? I mean, whether we like it or not, we're either in a recession or we're entering one, right? The economy isn't necessarily in a great position, at least that's what we're seeing. And so, where we had this spectrum where there was not enough workers, there was sort of this lack of employment. We had unemployment rates really, really low, which is great, right? But that means that from a perks and benefits standpoint, employers really had to be a lot more accommodating. Now, as the market starts to shrink and as businesses encounter more challenges, they have to pay closer attention to costs, right? That's going to change. And so I think what we're going to see is this movement, of the pendulum, potentially closer back to center. And I think that's really where it should be, right? There needs to be that healthy balance between the working from home and, having those benefits and perks while also being able to drive results for the business. So I've definitely seen that. I think it's a really important point. And really what it comes down to is the importance of the prioritization and making sure the results for your team are crystal clear. And if those results are crystal clear, I always say in interviews, a lot of times people say, okay, what are the hours and things like that? And my response is generally like, look, I don't measure based on the hours that you're here and the hours that you work and perceived action. right? It's what are your results? And if you can get this job done in 4 hours, like God bless you, that's great. But you probably can't, and if you can get it done, you know, within whatever time frame makes sense for you, that works for your life, and we measure those results, that's really where success can come to. So I think we're going to see that pendulum move, and I think focusing on results and outcomes and priorities is where employers might be able to find that balance.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think the self-care piece was really about what you were talking about earlier, Alice, in terms of people having to support their students learning at home and take care of family members, etc. But that should not negate accountability and the work that you have to do, right? So one of the things that we're looking at in terms of the educational sector, the nonprofit sector, and whether or not we're going to allow people to work remote or to have a hybrid work schedule is the expectations. Are there clear expectations? How are you communicating those expectations? Ensuring that there is a level of understanding of these are the deliverables, to your point, these are the results we expect in this time frame, and that there are check-in opportunities, right? Is it a once-a-week meeting with your supervisor? Is there a document that you can use to make sure that you're tracking information? So there is a give and a take where if you want to be able to do this and have the flexibility, you have to deliver this. As well as in a recent meeting just a couple of days ago, I talked about having an MOU in place with certain roles just to ensure that if it doesn't work out, that you have that space to take it back. Because if you're not getting what you need to be getting as an employer, then it's not working, and it has to work for both parties. So I think being clear, communicating expectations, anticipating as well when you're interviewing individuals, or if you already have individuals on your team, what are some of their strengths and weaknesses? And this is where the leadership piece comes in. I go in and do leadership assessments with companies. Is there a tool that you can use where you can talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, how you're incorporating those, and why it might not be a good idea to continue the hybrid or the work from home?
I just want to share an example I think I referenced earlier in one of maybe my responses about how we recently, just a few months ago, had to have that conversation internally about expectations, and we had to get very clear, we had to put it on paper, and we had to have a presentation about it and ask if anybody had any questions. And that was in February. It's only April, and I would say the shift in a positive sense has been overall very, very good. It also has created this kind of base level, or this, expectation base level, where we can go back to it now and more easily have conversations with individual team members to say, that thing we just talked about in February, well, we're gonna have to talk about how you're not meeting that, and here are the steps that are gonna be taken if this continues. And honestly, again, we're a small team, we have a lot of respect for each other. If someone doesn't show up fully in their job, it gets noticed pretty quickly. But still, just being able to reinforce that, it gives us a little bit of power, if that's the right word, to have those, and confidence to have those conversations. And I think it really encourages the individuals and the collective team to step up and show up.
I think I can add to that. I manage a team of 7, but the bank collectively has about 315 or so employees. One thing banks are really good at is procedure. Everything is written down all the time. So I think whenever you're setting those expectations, it's not enough to just communicate them verbally. I think everything has to be reinforced in writing. Do you understand this? Where are your questions? Making sure that it is a two-way street. It's got to be a reciprocal relationship, and when it is not, the manager really needs to have, I think, the confidence and the backup to be able to communicate that, look, we're missing the mark here. What can we do? And sometimes as a manager, it's kind of scary. You don't want to have those conversations. They're not comfortable for anyone. But ultimately, I think if you've got someone who's taking advantage of those tools, it's going to bring everybody else on the team down too. And that's something you really have to avoid. So that's just something that we just write everything. Everything's always written down. Any other questions? Do you need a mic?
No, good. So good morning. Thank you for the unblind room. I am going to look to implement that. We were both just talking about that. We thought that was a great idea, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So with my team, we actually have the hybrid. So I have them in 2 days a week into the office. And one of the things that concerns me is that my team may be drifting apart because of that remote capability. So I'm looking for some ways in which I can keep my team unified and still support that remote teleworking ability.
Yeah, I can, again, I'm not sure how large your team is or what that looks like, but we first implemented our weekly team meetings on Fridays towards the end of the day. I'm sharing a simple example here because of the pandemic, to get everybody online together. And then it kind of like weaned off because we were, they went from 45 minutes to 25 minutes to 15 minutes, and then we're like, what's the point if we don't have like an update or something? And then every year, at the end of the year, we do an annual check-in, which is now quarterly, based on our most recent one. We wanted to have more touch points. And the feedback was from a good chunk of the team, why don't we have those team meetings anymore? And it's like, oh, I didn't think you cared. I didn't think you wanted them. We weren't talking about anything. And because the team asked for it, they wanted a mandatory 45-minute team meeting at the end of the year. And did they regret it a little? Maybe, when we're staring blankly at each other at 20 minutes in after I gave my weekly updates. But it really made a huge difference. Just dedicating, and again, being intentional about the time that you're spending together. I also know that we do our coffee with Cole, which is just 15 minutes of getting onto a huddle in Slack. You can do it Google Meet, Zoom, Teams, whatever you use. Just setting that time. Does everyone show up every day? No, but I would say a good majority do. We also have team building days. It sounds old school. It sounds like maybe childish, naive. It goes a long way. It's some of our favorite memories, the different types of things that we do there. And then also try to do just monthly virtual get-togethers as well. So just trying, but you're like, how do I fit that all in? Because they have to get their work done, right? But, if you schedule it out and make it a point, it can go a long way.
And when you're doing the virtual get-together, are you using your cameras or is it?
Yeah, fun fact about Cool Creative, and I love sharing this. We never said you must be on camera. My entire team just showed up on camera from day one. Like, we ended up putting it in writing just in case we hired someone new and they weren't coming on camera, but, I'm on boards and committees and, most people aren't showing up on camera. So I would encourage it if people aren't showing, because it's like, when else are you seeing each other,
Right. I would say in education, when students are struggling, we do the check-in, check-out. And so I would say definitely having these checkpoints. I think starting the week together on maybe midday on a Monday, obviously you might need the morning to get started, but even if you do the 15, 30-minute check-ins, making sure that you do have specific things that you want to address. And we've done a lot of fun team things that you could even bring your family to. So we did this chocolate tasting event where everybody got a box shipped from a company, and we all got around. We knew that was the 1 hour we were going to have, and there was a representative from the company, and so I was able to bring my family to join me on a Friday afternoon. And we've done other things, wine tasting, and so you could get a company to do that, as well as I wanted to quickly address some of the questions that came in on the app that talked about the growth mindset and professional development, investing in your employees in that way, whether it's a fun activity or if it's having somebody come in and talk about the hybrid juggle. What are some of the areas that you're struggling with? What are some best practices in terms of working remote, in terms of juggling, home and work? It is an investment in your people, but then you could also turn it back around in terms of the investment in the company, right? So now that you have these best practices, what's working, what's not working, what can we do better? Is there a peer-to-peer mentorship opportunity where then you can pair somebody up that feels really good with a new hire or somebody that doesn't feel good, and they could share some of that? And again, that goes to the safe spaces and safe people that helps all around for an organizational culture that helps put everybody in the mind frame of growth. We're here to grow as individuals, but also as a company. So there's an investment in people that then comes back as an investment in the company. And that's what I do in my consulting firm, so I'm happy to support.
I totally agree with that. I think, so the success that we've had, obviously a little bit different, right, since we have people there, but still that difference is what I call like organic. So it's more organic types of team bonding and team building. And so we recently had several members of our team cross-functionally do some lean training. They all got their green belts, did different classes. It was huge. I mean, they see each other outside of work. It was off-site. I made sure it was. They spent a day there every other week for like 8 weeks. It was a big investment, but not only did they learn some things and had that level of pride when receiving the certificate, they also really bonded as a team, and I saw a huge improvement there. And the second thing is, I always find that you kind of just need to give people like something to start talking about, right? So we do some silly things, right? So we do like I2M Pet of the Year, comes up in May. It's a very rigorous competition. Everyone submits a photo of their pet and the name, and then we all vote on it. But you get to see, you know, the picture of the pet, you have the name of the person, and then you can comment on, you know, Bubbles the goldfish or whatever it is. And then we do, you know, I'm sure you may not have a lot of hunters in your business, but we do the biggest bucking deer at I2M. And so our team submits photos of whoever gets the deer with the largest racket. So it's, you know, things like that that we try and do on a monthly basis, just to give people a reason to engage and a reason to talk to each other, that's probably not work related and connect on a different level.
I think we probably have time for one more. Yeah, we can pull one from the app. Let's see. Oh, I think this is a good one. What are your viewpoints on bringing your whole self to work? Is there anything that we should leave at the door before we come in?
This is a whole nother session.
Yeah.
I think authenticity in the workplace is important in order for you to deliver your best. And when it comes to individuals like all of us in the room, right? If you identify as a woman, if you identify as a woman of color, if you identify from any marginalized community, there have been instances where you don't feel like you can bring your authentic self to work. I grew up in the projects in New York City, and as I went out into the workplace and traveled the country for work, my husband would tell me to leave my hoops at home. Today I forgot them by mistake, but he would tell me to leave my hoops at home because there was a negative connotation with hoops, where they were ghetto, they were not necessarily as accepted as studs or professional jewelry. And so a lot of the work that I do in coaching women especially is around, is that going to change the dynamic of how you show up? Is it going to make you less professional, less smart, less bright colors? I love seeing people with bright colors. There was a time where in the workplace you were expected to wear dark colors or dress a certain way. And so part of what goes into being authentic in the workplace is ensuring that you are expressing yourself, but also educating along the way, because it's a teachable moment, right? So someone's lived experience or lens is based on, they react based on their lived experience and lens. So they might see you wear something like, oh, you shouldn't be wearing that. That's a teachable moment. So instead of getting offended, take the opportunity to ask, why do you think I should not be wearing this? And I'll tell you why I am wearing it. And there's some, to your point, organic conversations and growth that can happen from expressing yourself. And that's part of the becoming more diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces that we're talking about. But there's a process to it, right? So that you're able to engage with others and not just show up and expect that people are gonna understand what it is that you're expressing.
I can speak from the perspective of just maybe the more emotional sense. On our website, our values are, we are authentic human storytellers, so I'll focus on the human aspect. And I take the approach of putting humans first before the CEO or board member or whatever it might be. So if I'm having a bad day, it's not like I'm gonna come in and be like, I'm having a bad day, don't talk to me, right? But like, it kind of lets the team know maybe how we can interact with one another. So I'm a big proponent of like, you don't have to share anything that you don't want to share, right? It's the workplace, you can come in, do your work and leave. Again, fortunately, that's not necessarily the culture we built, but you can be human. You're a little sad, you're a little tired, you're a little mad, that's okay. Like, let's talk about it, or not. You need some space, that's great, put up your way, or we'll ping you if we need you. I just think that that's really important, and I would never want to close the doors on just showing up as a human first.
Great. All right, it is 10:46, so I think we're going to wrap it up. But I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'm sure our panelists are available if you want to grab them after. If you have more questions, I think you can probably still submit them in the app too. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.